I opened the door to the McDonald's just as the evening air began to chill. The wind outside carried the faint smell of asphalt, slightly warmed by the late sun, mingled with the distant exhaust of cars passing along the empty street. The bell above the door jingled lightly, almost apologetically, as if even it hesitated to announce my arrival. The sound echoed briefly in the quiet space, bouncing softly off the high ceiling, the polished tiles, the walls painted in colors that felt warm and familiar. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed steadily, a constant drone that I had long since stopped noticing, but tonight it seemed to press against my ears, insistent and unmoving. I could feel its vibration in my chest as I stepped across the threshold, shoes squeaking softly against the tiles. The air smelled of oil, fries, and a faint chemical tang of the floor cleaner, lingering from earlier in the day. My skin prickled at the mix of warmth and sterile cold. I moved toward my usual booth, taking in the small, ordinary details that had always made me feel anchored here. The plastic seat was cool under my hand when I pressed it, the edges slightly sticky from someone else's lingering fingerprint. Condiment holders lined the tables, neat, still, like tiny, static sculptures. The booths reflected the white light, casting long, thin shadows along the floor that seemed to stretch and shrink whenever I blinked. I settled in, letting my fingers trace the texture of the tabletop, noting the subtle bumps and scratches that I had never cared to memorize, but now seemed impossibly significant. A few other customers moved slowly through the space. A young man tapping on his phone, completely absorbed. A mother adjusting her child's seat, the child fidgeting quietly. Behind the counter, a cashier wiped the surface in soft, circular motions. Each movement was deliberate, contained, almost ritualistic. The world inside this McDonald's was quiet, predictable, a rhythm I could follow and feel safe within. I ordered my usual meal, but even before it arrived, I could feel the familiar nervous energy in my chest. A sense that something was always just slightly off, if you noticed closely enough. The fries arrived first, hot, salty, and familiar. I picked one up, feeling the warmth seep into my fingers. I breathed in the smell. Comforting. Ordinary. I chewed slowly, deliberately. The soda fizzed against my tongue, the cool liquid sliding down my throat. I felt the vibration of the cup against the table, noticed the faint condensation forming rings on the laminate. Everything should have felt ordinary. Everything should have been fine. But as I looked up at the menu board, I noticed it. I tilted my head back toward the menu board as my fries cooled slightly in the tray. The golden arches glared above, steady, unchanging, or so I thought. My eyes moved from the pictures of burgers and nuggets to the numbers beside them. Calories. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe my memory was fuzzy, I told myself. My mind had been preoccupied lately, distracted by work, deadlines, the monotonous hum of life. I looked away briefly, distracted by a small movement near the window. A car had passed outside, its headlights reflecting off the wet asphalt, and when I turned my gaze back to the menu, something was different. The number next to my usual burger had shifted. Not dramatically, just a few digits, but it was enough to make my chest tighten. My fingers unconsciously pressed against the edge of the table. I blinked slowly, trying to clear the thought. Maybe I had misread it the first time. I looked away again, this time toward the drink machine, listening to the soft hum of refrigeration. The ice rattled in the machine's tray, a faint metallic chime accompanying the background murmur of the place. I felt my pulse in my temples, steady but loud. And when I looked back at the menu, it had changed again. The number that had seemed normal seconds ago now seemed wrong, unrecognizable. My mind searched for logic, for memory, for any explanation. Could the menu update in real time? I reminded myself of the digital screens, the new systems they had installed. Maybe it was part of the software. Maybe the calories were estimated. I shook my head slightly, pressing my palms against my eyes for a moment. The smell of fries and salt filled my nose, grounding me, but not entirely. When I opened my eyes, I stared again at the menu. The number shifted once more, almost imperceptibly, but I noticed it immediately. My stomach tightened, a hollow sort of anticipation settling there. I tried to ignore it. I focused on the routine, taking a fry, chewing slowly, sipping my soda. My eyes drifted to the other customers, the young man tapping at his phone, the mother adjusting her child's seat, the cashier wiping down the counter. Everything else seemed perfectly normal. The soft clatter of trays, the hum of the refrigerator, even the faint squeak of my chair as I shifted slightly, all these familiar sounds should have been enough. But the numbers, they didn't feel right. I found myself looking away again and again. Each time, a quiet dread followed me back to the menu. My fingers twitched on the table, a subtle, involuntary motion. I realized I was holding my breath without noticing. The air felt thicker somehow, heavier, though I couldn't explain why. I tried to reason it out, silently rehearsing explanations in my head. My eyes must be tired. I must have glanced too quickly. The numbers could be rounding errors, digital glitches. Surely nothing more. I chewed another fry, letting the warm saltiness fill my mouth, and tried to anchor myself in the physical world. And yet, as I looked up for the fourth time in a span of 3 minutes, the number had changed again. A small part of me wanted to call someone, to point it out, to ask if they saw it too. But another part of me, the larger, quieter part, just froze. I couldn't. The thought of admitting it, even to a stranger, felt impossible. It was too small, too trivial. But it had a gravity that my mind refused to dismiss. I sat there, hands folded over my tray, listening to the soft murmurs, the distant hum of a fan, the faint squeak of a chair across the room. The fries grew cold, the soda lost its fizz. I watched the menu once more, and the number had shifted again. I felt the first real tickle of panic then, a quiet, creeping sensation that wound itself around my chest. My breathing slowed, intentionally, trying to anchor me, but every inhale seemed to highlight the instability of what I had seen. Something was happening here, something subtle and insistent, and it had already begun before I noticed. I forced myself to take another bite, slow, methodical. The salt hit my tongue, the warmth spread through my fingers and arms. I tried to ignore the numbers, tried to immerse myself in the textures of the tray, the table, the hum of the lights. But the certainty that something was off remained, quiet, persistent, impossible to shake. And then I realized, with a small, involuntary shiver, that I had been staring at that menu far longer than any human should. I couldn't help it. Every few moments, my eyes drifted back to the menu. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was a compulsion. I tried to tell myself that it was meaningless, that numbers shifting on a screen shouldn't matter. But the subtle change, the almost imperceptible motion, had a rhythm. And once I noticed rhythm, it became impossible to ignore. The burger I always ordered, medium, sesame seed bun, single patty, was now a puzzle. One moment, it listed 450 calories. I looked away, just for a second, and when I looked back, it read 462. I blinked, shook my head, and tried again. 451. 463. I pinched the bridge of my nose, breathing deliberately, trying to steady my hands, my mind, my pulse. I noticed something else. The changes weren't random. They repeated in a pattern I couldn't predict, but the irregularity itself was consistent. My mind tried to trace the movement. Up, down, then a small spike, a pause. It made no sense, but the familiarity of the pattern was undeniable. It was mocking me silently, as if it existed to be noticed and only for me. I felt a small tremor of fear, not sharp, not urgent, but persistent, like cold water seeping into my skin. My heartbeat slowed as I forced myself to focus on the physical world. The plastic tray under my fingers, the sticky condensation of my soda cup, the faint smell of fries, oil, and cleaning chemicals. The hum of the lights above was constant, comforting almost, but it couldn't mask the quiet knowledge in my chest. Something was observing me through the numbers. I thought about leaving, standing up, walking away, ignoring it all. But I couldn't. My legs felt heavy, rooted. My eyes had already made the connection. My mind wouldn't let go. Every glance away was followed by an immediate need to return, to confirm, to witness. Other people moved through the McDonald's normally. A man with a baseball cap laughed with his friend. A mother adjusted her toddler's shoes, humming softly. A cashier wiped the counter in slow, practiced strokes. Everything was normal. Everything except the numbers on the menu that belonged only to me. I tried to rationalize. Perhaps the screens were updating calories based on some new system, portion sizes, oil ratios, ingredient sources. Maybe it was a software error. My mind grasped at every logical explanation it could conjure. Each one fell apart almost immediately. The numbers didn't just fluctuate, they adapted. They responded. I could almost swear that when I focused too long on a particular item, it adjusted, almost acknowledging my scrutiny. My breathing had become a quiet, controlled rhythm. Inhale, hold, exhale, inhale, hold, exhale. The world outside my control became background noise to the subtle, insistent pulse of the menu. I could hear the clatter of a tray in the distance, the soft squeak of a chair as someone shifted, the faint hum of the air conditioning. But above it all, the menu's rhythm persisted, steady, indifferent, unavoidable. I noticed a new detail, the timing of the changes. Every time I looked away to take a bite, to sip my soda, or to adjust my seat, the numbers shifted slightly. Always when I wasn't watching. Never when I stared directly at them for too long. The moment I looked away, even for a heartbeat, the world in that menu twisted quietly, deliberately. I started to question myself. Had I really seen 450 calories a moment ago? Was that the original number, or had I imagined it? My mind began to unravel the past few minutes, replaying it over and over, trying to catch the sequence, to find a fault in my memory. But it was useless. The numbers were fluid, but my fear was solid. A small part of me wanted to laugh, to shake my head and leave, to tell myself I was imagining it. But another, quieter part, the part that had noticed the pattern, that had felt the subtle adjustments, couldn't. I was tethered to this screen by something I couldn't name, something I couldn't resist. I looked again. The numbers shifted. 454, 459, 452. My pulse tightened, a quiet reminder that I had already stepped too far, that my eyes had given me knowledge I could not unsee. The pattern persisted, and with it, a slow, insidious certainty. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't chance. This was irrevocable. I picked up a fry, slowly, deliberately, and held it in my hand, tasting nothing, feeling only the pressure of the plastic tray beneath my fingers, the warmth of the food, the hum of the lights. The menu's rhythm continued to change, a subtle reminder that I had crossed a line. That something in the world had shifted slightly because I had noticed, because I could not look away. And as I stared again, I realized the truth. There was no going back. Once you see it, once you know it, even for a moment, it becomes a part of you. The numbers will always shift. The menu will always respond. And nothing can undo that. I tried to tell myself it was impossible. My mind reached desperately for explanations, for anything that could make this ordinary place feel normal again. Perhaps the screens were faulty. Perhaps I had misread, misremembered, misperceived. I traced my steps in my memory, counting every glance, every bite, every shift of my head. And still, the numbers had changed. Always, without fail. I sipped my soda slowly, deliberately, trying to anchor myself in something tangible. The cold condensation clung to my fingers. The sweetness lingered faintly on my tongue. But even as I focused, the menu's numbers swirled in the back of my mind. I tried to recall what I had seen a minute ago. 452, 459, 454, or had it been 451? 460? My memory wavered. I realized I no longer trusted it. I realized I could not trust myself. Every logical explanation crumbled under its own weight. Could the menu be tracking me? monitoring my gaze, responding to the pressure of my awareness. My mind recoiled at the thought, but I could not dismiss it. I felt a chill creep down my spine, subtle but persistent, a whisper against the back of my neck. I glanced around. Everyone was still oblivious. The cashier's hands moved methodically, wiping down the counter, stacking napkins with precise care. A man in the corner stirred his coffee, lost in his own quiet rhythm. The ordinary world continued, completely indifferent. And yet, I felt isolated, tethered to this screen, a single observer of a secret I had never wanted. I tried to focus on my own body. My hands felt cold, my stomach churned, though I had eaten nothing in the last hour. The rhythm of my pulse echoed in my ears. Each inhale seemed slightly too loud, each exhale a reminder of my helplessness. My eyes kept flicking back to the menu, even when I willed them not to. The numbers, fluid and uncatchable, haunted me. I began to question my own mind. Was this a hallucination? Stress? Fatigue? I had worked late, skipped lunch, felt tired, perhaps anxious, but no rationalization fit. Every time I looked away, the numbers shifted again. And always, they returned as if anticipating my gaze. I imagined leaving, walking out, pretending nothing had happened. I imagined the sunlight hitting my face, the cold night air outside, the hum of distant traffic. But even in the thought, I felt the pull of the menu, the impossible awareness that I had seen something that could not be unseen. The world beyond the doors seemed suddenly remote, fragile, incomplete. I tried to talk to myself, silently, almost aloud. It's just a screen. It's just numbers. Look away, stop noticing. But my own voice sounded hollow. The compulsion to check, to confirm, to witness, was stronger than any command I could give myself. I traced the pattern again in my mind, the subtle sequence of numbers. Slight increase, then decrease, then spike, then pause. My thoughts circled endlessly, looping, returning, finding no exit. I noticed my breathing had slowed further, deliberate, shallow, a quiet rhythm to match the unchanging pulse of the lights above. A small sound caught my attention, a chair scraping softly against the linoleum. My head turned sharply, but nothing had changed. The world was still ordinary. And yet, nothing was ordinary. Every detail of this room, every smell of fries and fryer oil, every flicker of light, was now tied irrevocably to that menu, to the knowledge I could not unsee, to the understanding that I was powerless against it. I touched the screen lightly with my fingertip, almost as if to test its reality, to anchor myself in something concrete. The numbers shifted immediately. 455, 461, 457. I withdrew my hand quickly. My pulse surged. My stomach knotted. I realized that even minimal interaction changed something. That whatever this was, it was not static, it was responsive. Alive, in some sense, though it had no face, no form, no voice. I sank back into the seat, a quiet resignation settling over me. The pattern continued. The numbers danced and shifted, uncatchable, yet unmistakably there. And I, alone in my awareness, realized the full weight of it. No explanation would ever be enough. No departure, no distraction, no willpower could undo what I now understood. The calories would always change when I looked away. The screen would always respond. And I would always be the one who noticed. I stood up slowly, letting the chair scrape softly against the floor. My fingers brushed the edge of the counter as I passed, cold and smooth. I told myself I would leave, that I would walk outside and let the night air wash over me, but my feet moved toward the menu once more. The lights above hummed quietly, a steady drone. I reached for the touch screen again, this time with a deliberate thought. Just check once more. Confirm. Make it stop. My hand hovered, trembling slightly, not from fear exactly, but from a quiet, insistent tension that had been building all evening. I pressed the item I had intended to order. 457 calories, I thought. But before I could look away, before I could remind myself to stop, the number flickered. 462. My breath caught. I traced the digits slowly with my eyes, as if counting them could make them stable. But they were not mine to stabilize. They moved, subtle, uncatchable, shifting just enough to remind me that I had no control here. The cashier moved behind the counter, her motions routine, methodical, unaware of anything unusual. I tried to speak, to ask a question. Is this normal? My voice was quiet, almost hesitant, swallowed by the soft hum of fluorescent lights. She smiled faintly, continued her tasks, and answered without looking up. The words, polite and automatic, did not belong to the same world I was in. I chose a simple meal, something I had eaten countless times. The menu's numbers flickered again as I touched the items. 459. 460, 458. I shook my head. Stop. Step back. Leave it alone. But I did not leave it alone. My hand hovered over the confirmation button. My heart ticked steadily, unremarkably, almost bored, in contrast to the whirlpool of awareness in my mind. And then I pressed it. The screen lit up brighter for a fraction of a second. The numbers shifted again, responding instantly, almost mockingly. I felt the weight of it immediately. A small, mundane choice, pressing a button, ordering a meal, yet its consequences spread quietly through the air around me. I could not undo it. I carried my tray to a booth near the window. The hum of the air conditioning filled the space between me and the oblivious world outside. I set the tray down. The fries smelled like they always did, warm and familiar, yet somehow different. The food felt heavier in my hands than it should have. Each fry seemed to tremble, just slightly, as if aware of my presence. I ate slowly, deliberately, watching the numbers on the screen flicker when my gaze drifted. 463, 461. 465. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on taste, texture, salt, grease. But I could not. Each bite reminded me of the impossible, the subtle awareness that I had tapped into something unchangeable. A small, almost imperceptible panic rose in my chest. I told myself it was over, that pressing the button was enough, that I could walk away now. I could not. My gaze returned again and again to the screen, to the shifting numbers. Each shift whispered a quiet certainty. Whatever this was, I had already involved myself. My choice had been made. I tried to rationalize it. It's just a screen. It's just a menu. Just a game of numbers. I am fine. But the words felt hollow. My body felt alert, every nerve aware of a tension I could not release. My eyes flicked from the food to the screen, back again. I felt the weight of knowledge settle on me, subtle but permanent. Outside, the streetlights flickered occasionally. A car passed slowly, its engine low, mundane, ordinary. And yet I felt a distance, a fracture, as if the world I stepped into beyond the doors had shifted slightly, irreversibly, because of a choice I made in the dim glow of a fluorescent menu screen. I told myself I would leave soon. I would finish the meal, pay, and go. But my fingers hovered over the tray, over the touch screen's afterimage, over the lingering shift of numbers that had begun the night. Each flicker called me back, each number a quiet, insistent tether. And I realized then, fully, that no simple act, leaving, finishing, ignoring, could sever the connection I had made. The choice was made. The pattern had begun. I had stepped across a threshold without noticing, and there was no turning back. I sat at the booth, my tray half empty, the fries and burger cooling slowly under the fluorescent hum. I tried to focus on something else. The low murmur of the air conditioning, the occasional squeak of a chair, the soft footsteps of a cleaning crew moving far away, but everything felt displaced, distant, as though the world had pulled slightly away from me. The menu numbers had stopped moving, or maybe they hadn't. I could not tell. My eyes flicked to the screen reflexively, and for a moment, 459 glimmered. Then 463. Then 461. I realized I no longer noticed the change. I only noticed that I noticed it. Awareness had become its own weight, and it pressed steadily against my chest. I tried to leave the booth, tried to push the chair back and walk to the door, to escape the smell, the glow, the quiet insistence of the numbers. My legs obeyed, slow, deliberate, almost like I was moving through water. The hum of the lights filled the empty spaces around me, stretching seconds into long, hollow moments. I reached the exit, the cold air from outside brushing my face, sharp, real, ordinary. I inhaled it deeply, thinking it would reset something. But the weight did not lift. It stayed, sitting in my chest, coiling in my mind. Every step toward the parking lot reminded me of the act I had done. The simple, mundane press of a button that had anchored me to something I could not name, something I could not escape. I glanced back at the building. The light inside the McDonald's flickered slightly, a low, even pulse. I could see the tray, the half-eaten food, the numbers glowing faintly through the glass. It was still there, waiting, watching, if watching meant anything. I could not explain it. I could not understand it. I only knew it existed, quietly, steadily, endlessly. I drove home slowly, the engine soft, the radio muted, listening only to the quiet rhythm of my own breath and the faint hum of tires on asphalt. Each street lamp passed with the same dim certainty. Each shadow in the rearview mirror seemed longer, slower than it should be. My hands rested on the wheel, not trembling, not alert, simply present, and aware of an invisible tether I could not cut. At home, I set the keys on the counter. The room smelled faintly of cleaning products, of cold air, of nothing. I sat on the edge of the bed. The tray was gone, of course. I had brought nothing inside. But the memory lingered. The menu, the numbers, the act. That small choice, pressed, confirmed, committed, had left a trace. A quiet, permanent trace. I closed my eyes. Tried to imagine anything else. A book, a street, a friend. But the sensation remained. A whispering insistence, subtle and unyielding, that the world was not as it seemed, that I had touched something I could not release, and that release would never come. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time felt loose, unmeasured, irrelevant. I could hear the distant hum of traffic, the occasional bark of a dog, the far-off creak of a neighbor's floorboards. All ordinary, all meaningless. I realized I would not sleep soon. Not for many nights, perhaps, because the numbers, the menu, the press of that button, it existed in a quiet loop in my mind. I could leave, I could eat elsewhere, I could act as if it had never happened. But I could not forget. I could not unchoose. And in that quiet, endless awareness, I understood something that had always been true, even before I noticed it. Some acts, no matter how small, are permanent. Some decisions, no matter how trivial, mark you in ways that nothing can erase. I listened to the soft hum of the city outside. The night held nothing for me but this. Nothing but the small, steady, impossible echo of something I had already done. And I sat there, quiet, watching, waiting. The menu numbers would change again tomorrow. Or perhaps tonight. I could not know. And it did not matter. I breathed. And the silence settled, thick and unbroken, around me.